There's something about the stillness of the night that shifts the way we think. Maybe it's the way the world quiets down. The hum of traffic fades, phones stop buzzing, and that constant pressure to be doing something just lifts. In that silence, it's like our thoughts finally have room to breathe. No distractions, no pretending, just us, and whatever's been hiding beneath the surface all day. Science backs this up. Studies show that our brains actually become more emotionally sensitive after dark. Melatonin, the hormone that helps us sleep, doesn't just make us drowsy, it also lowers our defenses. We feel things more deeply. Thoughts we could ignore when the sun was up start to demand attention. It's not just in your head. Nighttime literally shifts your emotional state. And because we're not juggling a million things anymore, we finally notice the thoughts we've been avoiding. That old memory, that unanswered question, that tiny ache in your chest you told yourself wasn't important. At night, it's all there, louder, sharper, and harder to look away from. But here's the strange part. For many people, that mental shift doesn't feel scary. It feels honest, like we've finally stepped out of the noise and into a version of ourselves that actually makes sense. Some call it overthinking, others call it clarity. Maybe it's both. But one thing's for sure, the night has a way of pulling truths out of us that we don't even realize we're holding onto. But where do those truths come from? And why do they always seem to lead us back to the same place? The things we want but never say out loud. When the world is quiet and no one's watching, that's when our truest desires tend to show up. Unfiltered, uninvited, and sometimes unfamiliar. Maybe it starts with a single thought. What if I had said yes? What if I left? What if I started over? These aren't thoughts that usually show up at lunchtime. They wait. They linger in the shadows of your mind until midnight, then slip into the silence like they've been there all along. There's a reason for this. At night, when we're no longer performing for anyone, not a boss, not a friend, not even social media, we're forced to sit with who we really are. And in that raw moment, we sometimes realize how far we've drifted from what we actually want. That's when the desire creeps in. Sometimes it's gentle, a longing to travel, to love deeper, to create, to slow down. Other times it's wild and restless, a need to escape, to rebel, to feel alive again. We might not act on these desires, but we feel them undeniably under our skin. You've probably felt it too. That sudden urge to text someone you haven't spoken to in years. That temptation to book a flight at 3 a.m. or delete everything and start over. These aren't random. They're echoes of something deeper, something you've pushed aside for the sake of being rational or responsible during the day. And it's not just personal. Across the world, artists, poets, even entrepreneurs say their boldest ideas hit them in the dead of night. That's because desire, real desire, doesn't care about logic. It doesn't wait for permission. It shows up when you're most vulnerable. And that often means after midnight, when you're too tired to lie to yourself. But here's the catch. Not all desires are loud or dramatic. Some are quiet, simple, a craving for peace, a longing to be understood, a wish to be seen for who you really are. These are the kinds of desires that don't scream, they whisper. And the night is the only time we can finally hear them. And sometimes, when we finally do hear them, it leads us somewhere we didn't expect. Backward, into memory, into regret, into the what-ifs we've tried to forget. There's something especially cruel about the way the past resurfaces at night. It doesn't knock. It just slips through the cracks, uninvited but impossible to ignore. A smell, a song, a half-formed memory you didn't even know was still in you. Suddenly, you're seen again, standing at a fork in the road you never took. Or maybe you're replaying the moment you let someone go. Or worse, the moment they let go of you. These what-ifs, they linger. They don't just visit, they camp out. You try to push them away with distractions, scrolling, music, mindless videos, but they wait, patiently, because they know the night gives them power. And in the quiet, when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, they come alive. What if you had stayed? What if you had said something? What if you had been just a little braver? These thoughts don't always lead to answers, and maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe they're just reminders of the roads we didn't take, not to punish us, but to ask, would you still choose the same path today? It's strange how the past becomes clearer at night. Like your mind is sifting through your story, trying to make sense of the moments that changed everything. Even if you didn't realize it back then, that one conversation, that missed chance, that goodbye that never really felt final. But maybe what really haunts us isn't the what-ifs themselves. It's the version of ourselves we imagine on the other side of them. The person who did chase the dream, who didn't stay silent, who said yes instead of no. That version of you lives somewhere deep inside, and sometimes the night lets you meet them, if only for a moment. But the past isn't the only thing that shows up after dark. Sometimes It's the fear of what's coming next that keeps us awake. There's a strange weight to the future when you're thinking about it in the middle of the night. During the day, it's easy to be distracted. Busy schedules, deadlines, people to see. But at 2 a.m., when the rest of the world is asleep and you're left alone with your thoughts, the unknown can feel like a tidal wave slowly creeping toward you. Will I ever get where I want to be? What if I'm running out of time? What if I never figure it out? These questions don't come gently. They hit with full force, and the silence makes it worse. There's no one to bounce ideas off of, no friend to talk you down, no background noise to drown it all out. It's just you and the terrifying freedom to imagine every possible version of what could go wrong. That's the thing. Fear loves the dark. It thrives in the unknown. And when there's nothing stopping you from spinning your worst-case scenarios, your mind becomes a screen for every what if. Your heart can't answer. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if everything I'm doing is leading nowhere? But as heavy as that sounds, it also reveals something important. Fear doesn't show up without reason. It only comes when something matters. You don't lose sleep over things that mean nothing to you. So maybe that 2 a.m. panic isn't just fear. Maybe it's a signpost pointing you toward the things you care about most. The dreams you're afraid to chase. The love you want but don't ask for. The life you haven't quite built yet, but can almost see. And in a strange, quiet way, that's kind of beautiful. Because even in fear, there's hope. Even in doubt, there's direction. The fact that you're thinking about the future, that you care, means you haven't given up. You're still reaching. And sometimes, when we sit with that fear long enough, we uncover something else underneath it. A quiet kind of courage that only shows up in the dark. Just before the first light breaks through the sky, there's a stillness. It's not loud or triumphant. It's soft, almost fragile. But in that silence, something powerful happens. You begin to breathe a little deeper. Your thoughts, once chaotic, start to slow. And somehow, the things that felt overwhelming just an hour ago feel a little smaller now. That's the strange magic of the night. It pulls everything out of you, your fears, your regrets, your longings. But once they've all surfaced, you start to see them more clearly. You realize some of them were never really yours to carry. Some were just echoes from the past. Others were borrowed from other people's expectations. And a few, they were just stories your mind told to protect you from the unknown. But now, there's nothing left to distract you. And in that raw honesty, you find strength. Not the kind you show off, not the kind you post about, but the kind that lives quietly in your chest. The kind that says, I've been through worse. The kind that reminds you you're still here, still standing, still trying, still hoping. And maybe that's what the night is really for. Not to torture you with doubt, but to peel back the noise of the world until all that's left is you, the real you, the version that's honest about what hurts, but still chooses to keep going anyway. There's courage in making it through the night. Not everyone talks about that. But if you've ever stared into the dark, wondering how you'd make it to morning, and still showed up for life the next day, that's strength. Quiet, unseen, but real. And just as the stars begin to fade, you realize something else is rising with the light. A sense of possibility you didn't feel before. Dawn doesn't rush in. It arrives slowly, almost shyly, like it knows how much we need the quiet before the noise. The darkness doesn't disappear all at once. It fades in layers. And as it does, something inside us begins to shift, too. The same questions that kept you up at night are still there, but they don't hit quite as hard. The silence that once felt heavy now feels peaceful. And the future, which just hours ago seemed terrifying, starts to look like something you might actually survive. Maybe even shape. Maybe even love. There's something sacred about that in-between moment, where night hasn't fully left, but the day hasn't fully arrived. It's a reminder that transformation doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just deciding, in the soft light of morning, to keep going, and you don't need to have it all figured out. No one really does. Maybe the trick isn't chasing certainty, but learning to live in the in-between, where you're not who you used to be, but not quite who you're becoming either, where the past is still present and the future is still unknown. But you're breathing, you're awake, you're here, and that, in itself, is a kind of miracle. In the quiet of the night, we meet the parts of ourselves we often try to silence. The questions, the fears, the dreams we tucked away. And while it's not always easy, there's something undeniably human about it. Because it's in those late hours, when everything else is still, that we hear the truth most clearly. We're all just trying to make sense of it, trying to find meaning in the chaos, trying to hold on to hope, even when it slips through our fingers. But if the night teaches us anything, it's that we're not alone in that struggle. And more importantly, that no matter how dark it gets, the light always finds a way back. So if you've ever felt lost in the silence of your own mind, remember this. The night doesn't last forever. And sometimes it's in those restless hours that we find our truest self and the strength to begin again. Because from dusk till dawn, the heart keeps speaking, even when the world is asleep.